Hello and welcome to the Frontend Coffee Break podcast where we just take a break from our everyday lives, work, or whatever, and we grab a cup of coffee. And this time, are you taking coffee today?
It's no,
Tea.
yeah.
I am with coffee, and we talk about all things frontend. It doesn't have to be just technical, but things about our frontend experience throughout the years. And today, as always, we have our colleague Ricard. How are you?
Hello, Happy New Year. I mean, how long can you say Happy New Year? Because it's the first time we have the podcast in this year, but it's almost February, so I don't know. It's the first of the year. I'm very happy to be here.
I think you can always say Happy New Year as long as you want. The thing is that it gets a point that people are gonna say, right, Happy New Year. But you can always say
June to you too. Yes.
Anywho, today we have an interesting topic to begin the year. It's 2026. This is at least the first podcast that we record for 2026, and we found that blah 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 blah. No, we are talking about CSS and the new features that have come out in this past year, and I think some of them are already widely available in all major browsers. Others are surely going to be very soon adopted. And it's quite interesting because we've discussed many times in the past about a couple of things that happen with CSS and JavaScript and HTML and how they evolve. Although HTML hasn't evolved a lot because it's more stable in JavaScript and in CSS, these are two things that are constantly evolving. And a lot of the times, this is just to put a little bit of context to the listeners. A lot of the times, for example, with JavaScript, there's a lot of features that appear in frameworks that become very popular and then become native functions in JavaScript. For me, the greatest one, or one of the ones that always comes to mind, is jQuery and the query selectors and how they were integrated in native JavaScript, making, in a way, jQuery completely obsolete. Although there's a version 4 out soon, recently.
There was.
I love jQuery, but that's the thing. And with CSS, a similar things happens. Suddenly, a new feature appears, and usually this means that you can style even better, you can style faster, simpler, or even without using JavaScript, which is fantastic always. Ricard, you're a big advocate of non-JavaScript, right?
Yes, the less JavaScript, the better. And I love to see these new properties that we're going to discuss right now, where before you had to use JavaScript, and now it's just a few lines of CSS, which makes it super performant, very lightweight. And yeah, I mean, JavaScript, I like it, but it has to have a reason, right? And if the browser vendors and the consortium W3C, they can come up with these features to make our lives easier. Remember the has selector? So man, it's life-changing.
It was a life-changing. I mean, that was my favorite new feature so far. And we, of course, because of the nature of this podcast, we don't intend to teach you what these new features, how to use these new features. But the idea is that we're going to talk about some of these new features and what these new features imply, how things were done before and how things can be done now with these new features. You know, it's not, there's many places that do a fantastic job teaching people how to use them. We will share some of the links so that you can, depending on the channel, you will have some links that you can follow and maybe take a look at them yourself. You know, the Mozilla web page site is always a fantastic source of knowledge. So go and look for them there. Our goal is not to teach you how to use them, just to talk about them, the implications that they have, how we did things in the past, and how we are doing things now, or we can do them thanks to these features. So we have a list here of some of them. Well, why don't you take off with the first element, Ricard, and let's discuss a little bit of what it is and how it how it rocked your world. And unmute yourself.
I'm very sorry, I was muted. Yes, I was going to say that how it's going to shape my future. Pun intended. Corner shape. I don't know. You will tell me. But this new corner shape thing that allows you to create this strange or very I don't know how to say it. Fantastic shapes on boxes based on border radius. I don't know, man. I haven't seen a real production design that would use this. Like, have you had to use this sort of shapes before with maybe images or another hacky, and now it's just CSS?
Well, for example, the first thing that I thought about is not for big for the big part. I don't think that it's that relevant. For example, in big boxes, you usually don't use some of these things. Although there's one value that I really love, and that's the one that I think that can be used: the squircle,
Squircle.
which is basically instead of creating a round edge, it's more of a square roundish edge. It's just a little bit more stylish than a small radio shape. For example, that one, I think it looks very nice. I saw some of the others: scoop, bevel, super ellipse, notch, that they create in different figures. But for that, I saw more of the creation of icons and this kind
Okay.
of cues that you can use inside the page for the sometimes maybe, for example, for the elements in a list or things like that. I mean, it seems to be the direction where you can go, reducing the amount of special additional things that you can bring in, like SVGs, or maybe adding SVGs in the CSS code, or whatever. That's the main place where I can see these being used.
Maybe cards, right? I can see people using this for sort of cards, like smaller cards, and then you have these cool borders. Fine.
Yeah, the idea is that you change the way that the border radius behaves. It doesn't have to be just a round border, but it can
Right.
be something. Yeah, it could even be. I mean, some of the cards, as you say, you can even change, add a little bit of styling. So it really is just reducing the way that reducing the amount of code that you need to achieve certain styles. I don't think it's groundbreaking,
No.
but it is an interesting feature. And remember, just like many other things, styles and the new properties, they can imagine how to do it one way, and people just find creative ways to use it a
For
different
sure.
way.
Not me,
I,
but
I
yes, they can. They can do it.
I always remember the Breath of the Wild effect, which means basically, for people that play video games, Zelda video games, like for example the Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, where they give a lot of freedom to the players, and they've done some wild things. I mean, it's just anywho. That's the first one, corner shape. We're starting very mild with that. Um, I think I don't know if how much I would use that. I would need to investigate a little bit to see what people are using it at. But it's interesting. It's one of the interesting ones.
Where are we going next?
Then we're going to do. Should we go strong, or should we go still? Yeah. Like what? Okay. One of the ones of my favorite that we have in the list is the custom select.
Oh my god, yes.
You
Yes.
are a big fan of forms. I mean,
I'm
are.
forced to. Usually my projects are all about UIs that are forms, but yeah.
When we started working, you and I, or when we met, I remember that thinking, "Oh, this is the form guy."
The form guy.
The form guy, because
The
a lot of the
native
things,
form. Native
that
form.
native
I
forms,
love to
yes,
use
native forms.
native stuff. Like when you see, I don't know, the old ways of. The other day I was reading a blog post. I don't know what it was, but they were sharing like how this library in React was doing a checkbox, and it was so many lines of React and JSX templates to create a simple input type checkbox, right? And nowadays you can do so much with forms, but to now even more with custom selects. I mean, how long have we waited to be able to customize with CSS the appearance of a select? It's amazing.
Yes, and this is something. I mean, uh, forms. I'm sorry that I'm blabbering, but this is one of those things, like one of those impossible dreams that we've been chasing for decades, I would say.
Yes.
How to customize forms when we think, oh, I would love to change the color of the border. I would love to change the content. I would love to change this, and that. Not only with selects, but with other elements, radio buttons, checkboxes, so many other things. And we've always questioned ourselves, why is it so limited? Why can't I style it? And finally, we have one of the elements styled, the custom select. Have you been able to check a little bit of some of the features?
Yes, it looks amazing. It looks amazing. Like you can customize almost everything. I love the items inside. Like you maintain all the accessibility of the native select, because in the end it's native HTML5. It's the select with the options, so it's very semantic, very nice for screen readers. But you can also enhance it with CSS if your browser supports it, or again if you don't need to do screen reading. And yeah, it looks amazing. And what we used to do with JavaScript, creating, a fake sort of clone of a dropdown, and then you would have to link the two. You had to link the fake div dropdown with the custom select. So when you went, because usually when you go to mobile, you want to use the mobile UI, which is, in the iOS is this sort of carousel thing. So you had to do both, and now it's no longer, man. I'm really looking forward when this is baseline and I can use it everywhere, because
this is very important, as you say. This is not baseline yet. This is not widely adopted yet. If you go to the Mozilla page, the MDN, you'll see that there's a warning saying, "Hey, it has limited browser support. You need to check the browser compatibility." But still, it is an amazing feature. Every company wants to style their selects, and it's always a pain in the ass. As you say, having to use JavaScript, having to use maybe even some assets just to make it look one way or another. Yeah. Maybe in this case, even, for example, here we have an example of precisely the corner.
No.
Yes, because you can use the corner to style, the element as such. But the important thing is that I think this is a major breakthrough, and it does simplify a lot of the code. Less CSS, less JavaScript. Welcome. It is really welcome.
Thank you, whoever came up with the idea, but thank you. Next one, it's my list here, scroll state. So as I understand it, you can now use a sort of, let's say, a sort of media query, but not a media query, but actually a scroll state query thing to trigger, again, property changes on elements based on if the element is at the top or the scroll is at the top. So you no longer have to use, again, JavaScript to do some sort of intersection observer on an element saying, okay, if my element is intersecting with another, or I have a scroll down this bit, do that. But now you can simply 2 lines of CSS and you can show and hide elements as you scroll down. It's amazing.
There's a fantastic video that talked in depth about these changes of scroll. It talked about the container type, scroll state, then the scroll target group, another one, and finalmente. There's my Spanish going through. And finally, the scroll marker group. I mean, all of these elements allowed you to, for example, they showed how to implement a carousel, a CSS native carousel that works quite nicely. But it was showcasing all these and how they work and how they interact, and it made a lot of it made a lot of sense, and it's fantastic. For example, and this is something that we do every day. 2 of the examples that I really loved about this was first the go to top. Mm-hmm. You could, for example, say, okay, the main page, the entire page is you give the container type scroll state, you give it a name, and then with the state query, you say, hey, is this element scrollable? And then basically based on that, you say, is this element being scrolled already? You can even do the same thing. I think they were using examples of, is this element sticky? It's already sticking. That means that the page has scrolled. And based on that, it's if that condition, if that's a query, it returns true, then you add some styles. And the styles could be, for example, you suddenly show the button, which is an anchor link that takes you to the top. And when you're in the top, you hide it. And it's just boop, boop, depending on that state. Is the page scroll and that's the container. It doesn't have to be the entire page. It could be just a small container. Is the container scrolled? You can just add elements, change give a cue that you're scrolling. You can show something, hide something, and that is super great.
Yeah, just CSS. Performance is top notch again. You don't have JavaScript. Wow, that's good. It's very good.
And as you say, and the other one, the scroll target group, with these all new scroll functions, I loved that you could completely remove the use of the intersection observer. And with this, it's through pseudo elements, pseudo selectors, basically. You can determine, okay, what is being shown in the page right now, and based on that, you change the style of, I don't know, a list, an index, so that you can highlight menus and do things like this. Things that we needed not only intersection observer, sometimes we also needed to throttle or to do other techniques, JavaScript techniques, just to be checking the scroll of the page, how fast it's moving, where it is, blah, blah, blah. And with this, purely CSS, it changes, and it's quite a common use case. The same thing with I think that you could do it with the sticky. If an element is sticky, you can change the style once it's sticking out, and that's I think that this is going to simplify a lot of styling, a lot of JavaScript, a lot of with these CSS new features.
I like more micro animations. We need to like teach the designers that this is possible and this is cheap to do now. Because maybe before, when you saw it, you were like, "Oh, this is expensive. Like it's gonna take us a while." But now, if it's a few lines of CSS and you know how to do it, then it becomes cheap and you can do it. And then up to designers to create a nice micro animation and not something that is not very useful.
Yeah, and this is just like once again, this is, for example, a very specific case that we just talked about, like the scrolling and such, and it will be used for that. But once again, with people being creative and finding different ways to, especially those that are masters of CSS, they will find, they most likely will find interesting ways of using this just to create special effects, special animations, fantastic things. So this is just like the base case surface, and it's just the base case. It's amazing.
All right, next one. I know you are a typography nerd and you love typography and placing things perfectly. You love Pixel Perfect because you're a perfect person. So text box. Now we have this property that allows you to exactly place like the text aligned with other elements, like the baseline of the font exactly. Like explain me how this works, because I saw the demos and it felt like a designer's thing, not the front-end thing. So how am I responsible for this? Or as a front-ender, why should I care?
It was interesting. A couple of things were interesting. One of just for example, there's one base case that I loved. It showcased how useful this could be. Imagine that you have an image and then you have text right on the right side, and you want to align the top of the text to the top of the image. Usually things that you would do, you would either play with negative margins, trying to push the text box or the container that has the text to push it up until you align it perfectly.
Right.
You can always use flex, depending on how you're building everything. Of course, you can also use flex to try to align the text or something like
Translate, yeah.
And or you can use also, and this is one thing that I've used a lot, and I think that this new property will be removing this completely, or making that obsolete, is the line height. Usually sometimes plays with a line height so that the text aligns perfectly, but that only works with if you have one line,
Right.
So the idea behind this new feature is that you can say, hey, this text box, the text box, you remember all the space that you have above the top of the text and below top of the text, remove it. So you can actually place a text box just right beside image, for example, and you say, remove the top of the text. I think, let me see, I have it here in my notes. It was, you just needed to add, wait. I just lost there we go. Trim start. You have trim start,
okay.
Trim end, trim both, and you could say trim start. So basically, the top of the text is going to align perfectly to the top of the element that it's going in.
So the letter, you mean like the letter R is going to be aligned with the image perfectly on the top? That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. And also, for example, for those that want a little bit more pixel perfection, because you have nowadays we know that pixel perfection is expensive, and potentially it really doesn't bring that much value. Well, it may be controversial, but I think it doesn't bring that much value on the web. But with this, you sort of can more or less make it somewhat pixel perfect, because you can say, okay, just trim the top of the box, and now I can perfectly align that text with the element above, which is with the margin of 20 pixels. Right? It's going to be 20 pixels.
But what's really funny? Like we spent so much time for the past few years teaching designers the box model and saying, hey, remember that you cannot align the text to the top. You have to use a box model, right? And the text is going to have some empty space. The letters are going to have an empty space. And now you'll tell them, you know what? If you don't want a box model, that's fine. We will align the text at the very top for you. So yeah, poor designers.
Yeah, but well, it's one new feature. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with the CSS. It advances. Sometimes we have to work with it close with the designers to say, hey, this is possible, this is not possible. Let's do it this way, this other, and then boom, a few years later, you have this new feature that remember that thing that you wanted to do? We can do it now. But it was interesting.
Next, sibling indexed. Index, whatever that means. It's a function that returns an integer representing the position of the current element in the DOM tree relative to all its siblings elements. And I already have a headache. So what does it mean? Like I have a list, let's say UL li, and what can I do with this?
Well, for example, this is the one of the I found two uses for this one. Well, I have found one actually. The animation. When you have a list of elements and you want to animate, for example, a list of cards that you put in each one inside an li, you usually add through JavaScript or through in our case, for example, that we work with AM in HTML. We add an index, we multiply the index so that it or Java or whatever, so that it adds CSS properties that have, I don't know, 10 milliseconds plus multiplied by the number of the index.
Right.
But we have to do it either by JavaScript and insert that, or a long list of CSS saying li index nth index 0.
Right, the nth child. Yeah, you could do
Nth
nth stuff, but you
child.
had like 20 selectors. Yeah, got it.
So, for example, that's actually I hadn't thought about that, but yes, this would be the perfect example. It reduces the amount of nth childs you might need to use, especially if each one is like, oh, the number plus multiplied by or plus blah blah blah. Well, you can simplify this with a calc and this.
It's a one-liner. Okay,
it's a
awesome.
one-liner.
Awesome.
And this case, the biggest use case that I see is basically just in the delayed animation, when you have just your cards appearing slowly one after the other. This simplifies it a lot. Less JavaScript, less anything.
That's cool. That's cool. Related to the siblings, we have another one. Sibling count. What is this?
Yes. The sibling count, it's interesting because the difference is that you can determine how many siblings the element has. And so, for example, in a list, once again, I think that this is affects lists, or the examples that we've seen on lists goes a little bit on this. Imagine that you have a list of cards. Why? Because we've been talking about the cards. And usually, for example, you want to say, okay, so each card is going to be 1/3 of the page visually. Okay, so it's card width is 33% minus 10 pixels. I don't know, but it's
Sure.
You use 33%. But what happens when you don't, for example, know exactly how many elements they're going to be, and you want to line them up and divide them evenly inside the page? There's several ways that you can do it. Yes, you can do it with Flex, for example.
Yeah, Flex will do it.
Flex would do it. But this way, for example, a simple example would be, I've been saying example a lot. A simple way of using it is that you can say, hey, the width is equal to the index count, 100 divided among the index count.
Right.
So depending on how many elements, it's always going to be that. Of course, this is it doesn't look like a very useful example, and I agree in that
not
sense.
for the width, but for a different property, right?
Yeah. It could also be, I guess you could use it also for different properties, changing colors or animations or things like that depending on the amount of elements that you have inside. Maybe you can divide the for example, here we go. If you want the full animation of any elements, for example, you have between 2 and 5 or 10 elements, and you want the entire animation of how they start appearing to last 5 seconds, you can make sure that the 5 seconds are divided based on the number of elements that it has. So
right.
It has
a dynamic number of elements. Maybe it's configured
Exactly.
by the author, and then you don't know exactly if it's 5, 10, or... And before you had to use JavaScript to query, okay, how many elements do I have? And then maybe some inline CSS. Okay, I got it. Okay.
So it's still, and once again, of all, other features that we've talked about, we still need to see the potential. It's interesting. I see more potential in the sibling index, but the sibling count is still interesting, I think.
We have two more, and these are fat ones, and I need you to talk to me with this. First of all, if function is wait a minute. If so, are you saying that CSS now is a programming language?
I mean, it seems that there's a couple of functions that just appeared, and I do think that it's starting to make CSS a little bit more like a programming language.
Conditionals. The thing is that this if function, it only allows you to use in the conditions style query, media query, or feature query. So, give me an example. Why would you use like if media query instead of just adding the regular media query? Okay, let's put it in more simple terms. Let's say, I don't know, a background. Okay, you have background red, and you say, okay, for desktop, I want background green. So you could say background : red, and then open the media query block, say desktop width 1000, and then inside do background the other color. Why would you use the if in this case.
The first time that I read about if, I'm with you in the sense that it looks strange. It looks somewhat redundant. It's just like we've already have ifs in a way. The queries, the media queries are ifs.
Yeah, it's an if. Yeah.
All the queries can be used as ifs. And I think that we're well covered with that. I started looking into some of the examples, precisely something like this, like, hey, I want to change the background, or I want to change the width, or I want to change the flex direction from row to column, depending
Sure.
on this.
Mhm.
You can use media queries and it would work perfectly fine. The difference that I found is that the if, it works a little bit like a shorthand. It works like a little bit like a smaller version of the media query, because in the end, you're instead of putting it in two separate places or putting the element, some values, properties first, then media query, another media query, and defining the values that it has based on media queries, you can use basically an if. If, else, if, well, not else, but if, and you can determine if it's desktop, use background is green. If not, it's using the other one.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how to use it because it's a little bit like strange to see it in CSS. But the way that I saw it, or at least the value that I saw behind it, was that it simplifies the syntaxes in with media queries.
Right. So you don't repeat the property name. Let's say background will always be defined once, the background, then colon, and then inside you put the conditions. So you don't have to repeat again later in the other block background again. It's just one background property, and inside you say, okay, media query or state query, whatever it is, you put it in there. Yeah, it makes sense. I guess if you only want to change one property, it makes total sense. Like cleaner code. But the moment you have to change multiple properties, because you say, okay, yeah, on desktop, I want to change paddings, colors, font sizes. Yeah, I don't know. I guess you could still use media queries and it's fine. It's a complementary feature for smaller things. If for the bigger chunks of code, use a block.
And we have variables now as well, and you can change the variables values or determine properties based on variables. I mean, it's just the way that I see it, it's just like an additional tool in the already extensive tools of things that you can do with CSS. And this is just one extra thing, which I find fantastic.
Got it.
But then we have more complex things. I don't know if you've managed to see the functions, the possibility of adding functions.
Man, yes, this is cool. Again, programming language. So something that you had forever in SAS, right? You could create functions to do calculations. I don't know, a function, you pass these two colors, these sizes, and then based on whatever, again, you output something and it gets rendered in the CSS. So in SAS, how it used to work is like it happens all at compile time. So if you use the function 3 times, you only see the outputted result of the function as a value in a property, right? But with the CSS function is going to be shipped to the client and you will have it in the CSS. You will see function CSS then used in different properties. So I mean, benefit, you don't need SAS, but as a con, it's like you're shipping more code than before, right?
I guess, depending on how much you reuse that function.
No, but with SAS, the function is not sent to the browser at all because it's compiled. You don't see the function in SAS. You just see the rendered value in the property, like with 300. That's a calculation we done.
Yeah, but for example, the difference is that, well, I need to see how extensive you can use the function in order to reuse the code. But for example, if the function, with SAS, it basically transforms the function and outputs the values, the results. But if, for example, if you have a long result, it outputs the long result several times, every time that it appears somewhere. While in the function, it's called in that moment. You have just a one-liner that calls the function gets interpreted, and it's just like a go-to. You go, you interpret, and then you go back, but the definition of the different values is just set once. And then you just reference that function. So I think depending on how you're using it, it would be much less scope.
But also maybe it's not static, right? Because if you use like CSS properties and then you change the CSS property, maybe like the function is recalculated then, and I assume. It's not a static anymore. It's a dynamic function, right? Based on stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and for example, there's I was taking a little bit of a look at some of the options that they give you. There's a function that's called transparent. Basically, you pass a color and it gives you the transparent color based on whatever value that you wanted. Let me see if there was another option. Well, lighter, but I guess that it reduces the color to a more lighter shade, darker.
Right, but then the color code could be a CSS property that you change on the fly, maybe because you have themes on the website or something, or a dark theme. The user clicks the UI, you change the CSS property, and automatically this function recalculates auto transparency. That's cool. That's very cool.
And there's, for example, there's this is an interesting example that it's called narrow wide function. It's just one of the examples that you can find in MDN. It says the narrow wide function accepts two parameters, narrow and wide, and the result and returned result is the wide property unless the viewport is less than 700 pixels wide, in which case the narrow is returned. In this case,
it's dynamic. Yeah,
it's dynamic. And the interesting thing about this one is that, for example, you can have a value of, let's say, once again, you have a media query where you change the value between red and blue, depending if it's desktop or mobile. You use the media queries, you use the ifs, you use whatever you want, or you could have a function where you say, give me blue if it's not in the narrow parameter and position, or give me red in the white position.
Interesting.
So so in this case, you just put color, narrow white. You can call it something else. Color, narrow white, blue, red, and in one line, you know that you're going to the background color property is going to get. Well, this is I understand that this is the way that it would be working. In one line, you get the value blue if it's desktop, if the value green or red if it's mobile, or whatever way that you put it. The important thing is that it's a one-liner, and you can see. I don't know. You can even call it media query or whatever you want, and you can put the values in just one line and in just the same line. This one, for example, I find it more useful than the if for this kind of things.
Right. I mean, but it feels like you can do the same solution in 3 different ways. You could use a regular media query, an if media query, or you can use a function which inside has a media query.
Oh, for example, this one, there's a lot of examples. I love this one, font size. You use the font size and you say 2.5 rem to rem. So basically, depending on the, and it's just one line. You don't need to go to the media query to see what the font size is in desktop. You don't need to, you don't need to have an if.
Say, you say this is 2 rem, but then the function based on media queries, it will return more pixels or less pixels. That's cool. That's cool.
So this one, for example, I think that this function, the narrow wide, well, it's called narrow wide in the MDN, but maybe it would be, I don't know what it would call it, media query or
I mean, I would
device.
expect if you as a tech lead, as a front lead, you see this sort of code. I mean, I would expect the function to be a little bit more complex than just a media query, because if you're using a media query, maybe just use a media query. But if it does something else, if it does media query plus another calculation plus something else, because maybe you have media query, but you are sending another argument in the function, a second argument. I don't know. Maybe then that's fine.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. And
use it.
Yeah.
I want to see it in production.
Yes. Well, I think that that's all the time. There's still other things, other features that have come out in this past year. The shape function, the scroll markers, the height, width, stretch. I mean, there's many other options that I think it's worth taking a look. For those listening to us, if you haven't seen what's in store in 2026 or the things that have been coming out recently in CSS, you definitely should do it. That doesn't mean that you need to use it immediately, but it's good to know that these features are out there.
Yes, please check always with caniuse.com. See if the properties that you want to use or the functions you want to use are available in your browsers. Otherwise, you will have a big surprise in production. So yeah, check before using it, but definitely learn how to do it.
And once again, we'd love to see which of these features you think is more interesting. Just comment and let us know. So thank you everyone for listening, and see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.